Gosh, that doesn't usually happen, right? Good afternoon, everybody. Let us begin. My name is Martin Davis. I'm the director of the Maritime Law Centre. I think many of you probably know that. Although the centre is hosting this event, it's not really, as I've said in the various messages I've sent out, it's not really a maritime event. It's an event to remember the effect that Katrina had on the law school. And we have a wonderful panel, each of whom has a slightly different story to tell about the effect that Katrina had on the law school. You don't want to hear from me because they all got remarkable stories to tell. The first speaker is, you have biographies, at least brief biographies of them all in the document you've just been handed out. The first speaker, Larry Poneroff, many of you may have actually had classes with Larry, was the dean at the time that Katrina hit. He was also part of President Scott Cowen's reconstruction team. Was that how you would describe it?
Leadership group.
Leadership group, there we go, right? That convened in Houston thereafter to organize the reopening of the university in the spring 2006. But I've already said more than I should because that's Larry's story, not mine. So over to Larry. Thank you, Larry.
I want to hold your applause until I'm finished. Thank you, Martin. I appreciate that. I appreciate the invitation to be part of this panel. Hard to believe it's 20 years. In the 9 months preceding the storm, we began working with a local architectural firm on a fairly ambitious building renovation and expansion project. Back then, we were bursting at the seams. We were at least a third larger in terms of student body and faculty than we are now. And over the previous 4 years, we had accumulated a little over $7 million of surplus revenue. And bricks and mortar seemed like a good thing to devote that revenue to because we needed it and it's a one-time expense. We didn't know that there would be a continuing income stream. So we finished the design work and had the plans in place by midsummer of 2005. And in early August of 2006, we signed an agreement with the general contractor to do the work. And in mid-August, the general contractor erected scaffolding all around, I guess if I recall, the downtown side of the building, which of course ended up just contributing to more broken windows when the storm hit. Now, the reason I tell you about that project, as Martin mentioned, I was part of this 14-person group that Scott Cowan, then president, put together, as was Paul Barron, who's an emeritus member of the faculty as well. When I got to Houston, which is where we operated from, I had been there, then I went to Chicago, then I got back. My orientation from the president took 20 seconds. He said, while you're here, you're a university officer at large, you're not the dean of the law school. And you know how you were worried about what you were going to do with your surpluses? Well, you don't have to worry about it. That was no joke, because in the early days in Houston around the Labor Day, survival was a real question, frankly. First of all, Paul will remember, university, maybe emergency planning wasn't what it was today. We had access to none of our systems. Student record systems, employment records, financial systems, nothing. We belong. What was done was a handful of IT people were sent to the 1555 Poydras building where the IT function was housed, surrounded by a phalanx of Jefferson Parish deputies, because you remember what downtown New Orleans looked like around Labor Day, to retrieve the backup tapes. And if they had not gotten those, we would have been out of business at that point. They were obviously successful, and the tapes were brought up to, I think, SunGard in New Jersey and put on their servers in their data center. And you can go ahead now, Mark.
What? Oh, yeah, what? Okay.
Let the record be clear, we have not rehearsed this.
You can tell. There we go.
Well, you remember, when we got back in January, this is, I don't know, what do you call it, an acrylic memento that Scott gave to all the members of this group who had been in Houston. And what it obviously reflects is the 3 stages that we went through. The first, as I said, was survival. And we literally talked about the process we go through to close the university, if it came to that. Once we got access to our systems again, the next stage was recovery. Now, the university's losses from the storm and the swine, if you include building contents and business interruptions, was about $500 million, which today would be just under $1 billion. So it was a mammoth undertaking. But again, we knew if we were not open and operating in January, we were out of business. So we resolved in this recovery phase, as long as the city would give us first order amenities, power, water, sewer, we were prepared to do everything else, including, if necessary, a 2-lane grocery store and a 2-lane cleaners. Now, fortunately, we didn't have to do those things, but as part of the recovery effort, we did buy an apartment building and charter 2 cruise ships, what do you call it, docked or berth in the Mississippi to provide shelter for members of our employee base and students who were telling come back, but they had no place to go. So it was really a remarkable undertaking to finally get to putting together what Scott called the renewal plan, which was a really fundamental reorganization of schools and operations in the university. In the law school, what it looked like when we came back, and first of all, amazingly, over 90% of our students returned. And it's really significant when you consider, particularly the one else, they had been in class for a week or less. And of course, I think it's still true now, 85% of our student body comes from out of state. And 85% of that 85% from more than 500 miles from New Orleans. And yet we had, an extraordinary return rate. And what we resolved, well, the president wasn't looking, I was playing dean of the law school a little bit on the side. What we resolved is that we were going to put together a program in the spring of 2006 that would allow every student who wanted to get caught up in his or her program of legal education. So what this meant, it was what I called at the time, maybe polite, I called it the Barry Bonds semester. Because it was a semester on steroids. And maybe that reference is already dated for many of you. But instead of the usual 15-week semester, we were in session for almost 6 months. We had 2 truncated 10-week sessions in which we taught in the first all of our fall 1L classes, and in the spring all of our spring 1L classes, because some of our 1L students had been visiting in the fall, many had not. We had to offer all of our regular upper level spring courses, but in addition to that, we also had to offer the fall courses which upper level students needed to satisfy either specialty program or certificate requirements. And we were in class 6 days a week, including Saturday. I think every faculty member, except me, taught 3 classes, but I taught 2. You know, I guess it's that lifeboat phenomenon that occurs, and it never lasts, but there was just this attitude that semester of we're all in this together and we're gonna get it done no matter, you know, what it takes. And we made a point of, you know, having opportunities for social interactions between faculty and students. And it turned out really to be I think a marvelous experience. And we survived. And of course, the next year, as we brought our English class in, I said, we gotta get smaller. Given the pervasive negative national publicity New Orleans is receiving, we cannot bring in whatever it was, 330 students and maintain our academic standards. I said, we need to go down to 250. And then I had to tell the president that. This was the old days when law schools were making money for the university. But it was great. You know, said that's the right thing to do. And we started attracting a different kind of student. You know, I mean, prior to that, we had a lot of out-of-state students who say, yeah, I want to come to New Orleans. Sounds great for 3 years, 3 Mardi Gras. Well, we started getting application enrollment from students who never thought about Tulane, but now wanted to come here to be part of rebuilding a healthy urban community. And we doubled the community service hours after we got back so that we would play a meaningful and appropriate role in that. I'll close by saying this sounds a little odd, but well, it was an overwhelming, horrible experience. In a certain way, it was also exhilarating. Because, you know, we did, and I'm talking now just not this group in Houston, but everybody, our faculty, our students, staff. We did what had never been done before. There was no manual for this, there was no playbook, but everybody played their part, played his or her role. And I think in many ways, it changed us all profoundly. You know, life became, everything was in terms of before Katrina and after Katrina. And we still talk that way to some degree now. So that's sort of my story from the university law school level. And I guess we can turn it over to.
Thank you very much, Larry. Thank you. If I can just add, I have always thought that President Cowan and the team that he used saved the university. An extraordinary effort that saved the institution that we're now all part of. Our second speaker is Judge Meredith Grable, who is the Chief Judge of the U.S. District Court, Bankruptcy Court of the Eastern District of Louisiana. Sorry, I screwed that up. Right. Who was a 3L at the time the storm arrived, and was the editor-in-chief of the Tulane Law Review, which succeeded in publishing its journal for that year. But again, that's Meredith's story, not mine. So over to you.
Well, thank you. I love coming back to Tulane. I left once we graduated, and I'll get to that in a minute. Clerked for a couple of judges, went to New York, but was happy, more than happy to come back here and raise my 2 boys. But it's nice being in the same room with Professor Davis and Professor Barron. I had these gentlemen in class, and I just feel like we're home now. Thank you for the invitation to speak. So I'm going to tell you about what my position is where you are at right now. So how many 2Ls do we have? Any 3Ls? All right, those are my guys. So you know how myopic law school can be. You're just trying to get to class. The first year, you're just trying to read these cases. The second year, you have to read the cases, go to class, answer the questions. Then you have to do the journal or do the midcourt or do the clinic, and you also have to get the job. So everything's planned a year in advance. And that's all you know. And so, and for some context, my 2L year, we had a hurricane blow through, and my two best friends in law school were native to New Orleans, and I did not know. It's like, what do we do? This is the first major storm that I had had. It came into the Gulf, and I was like, am I supposed to evacuate? Where do we go? Because I'm not from here. I had moved here from Seattle. I'm originally from East Tennessee, as you can tell by the accent, but I was living 10 years in Seattle and came down here for law school, and I said, guys, what do we do? Oh, don't worry about it. It comes, it goes. We're not going anywhere. I said, well, I'm looking around and a lot of other people are going places. And they were like, yeah, no, don't worry about that. And so I didn't worry about that. And on the morning or actually the day before when that hurricane came, my 2 year, I called them up and I was like, hey, where are you guys at? And they're like, oh yeah, we're in Baton Rouge. I'm like, what? And so I ended up sitting on the Slidell Bridge for like 10 hours because there was no contraflow, there was no nothing. And so then fast forward, there's another storm and it's coming across Florida, and it's supposed to come across Florida and take a hard right and go up the coast. And, by that time I'd been elected as editor-in-chief of Law Review. We have been editing all summer. This delightful man called Sir Basil Marcus had written this tome. And, he had 5 or 6, international authors that wrote responses to it and talk about the international sources. We were working all summer on this thing. And that man wanted his thing published. So, here we are working, and we're meeting with Judge Feldman, who was the chairman of the Board of Advisory Editors. We're down at Giuseppe's having drinks. And this thing's coming in, and we're just thinking, we're not going anywhere. I just sat for 10 hours last year on the Slidell Bridge. I'm not going anywhere. And none of us did, many of us didn't. So it's really appropriate that we're having this conversation this particular week, because as Professor Davis pointed out, we were only in class for a week when it hit. So when Dean Poneroff mentioned the fact that all of the systems were down, what that translated for me was that none of my student loans had been dispersed to the school, but they hadn't been dispersed to me. And I was paying rent at the Jackson on St. Charles or the Georgian on Jackson and St. Charles. And a lot of us were paying rent here, and then we didn't have our student loans dispersed to us. And so then all of a sudden, we're in the position of either leaving at the last minute, or like my partner and I did, we rode out the storm here and were able to get out a couple of days later. Long story. So I would invite you to read. So I was editor-in-chief for volume 80, and then 10 years later in volume 90, the editors asked me to write my experiences down for that. And so I'm just going to give you the site. I'm not, but I'd encourage you. It's, I think, entertaining. Yeah, I can, at the time it was terrible, but we can laugh about it now. But like it was harrowing. So it's 92 Lane Law Review, Romanet I. And so we get, like I said, we didn't know what to do, where to go. My husband and I got out. We were picked up by my father-in-law, who had driven 20 hours with, 10 gallons of gas in the car. Picked us up after our, crappy Jeep broke down on the Mississippi State line. Long story. But when we got to Austin, and we got to Austin because of Sir Basil Marcus. So that little cute man with his cucumber sandwiches, was a part-time faculty at UT Austin, and he intervened with the dean there to say, I really need the 2-lane law review to be at UT Austin. And so Dean Powers at the time said, as many folks as you can get to Austin, you come. And so we did. And to Dean Poneroff's credit, he had intervened on behalf of all of the 2-lane law students with all of the deans across the country, and said, please take our students. And so we were instructed to go wherever we could get in. And most people went home, like I'm saying, 85% of us were from somewhere else. And so a lot of us went to our homes. I went to Austin, and I told the law review, anybody that comes to Austin, let's do this. And so we got about 15 of us, junior and senior members, to go to Austin. The rest of us were, scattered across the country. And so I called up all of the editors-in-chief of every law school where we had 2-lane law students, and asked, can you give us some resources so we can do this thing? But because none of us, very few of us had financial aid disbursed, we were paying rent in 2 places. I had friends of mine from Seattle that took up a collection and sent me a few $1,000s so that I could pay rent in Austin and eat. Like it was, you know, again, you're so dialed in to what you're doing in law school that you just don't think about, you know, basic necessities. Case in point, when we evacuated, we took our laptops and our books, like useless. Useless. We didn't take clothes. We didn't take anything. I mean, you know, my SME was in Chicago, you know, with like a bathing suit. It was hot and she was like laying by the pool and we all thought we were just gonna come back a couple of days later. It was no big deal. You know, so our laptops seemed really, really important at the time. Useless during the apocalypse. So we, you know, when we got to Austin and we decided to publish and, you know, that weighed heavily on my mind. And I go into this in the article that I wrote. It's like, why? Does anybody really read a law review article? I mean, close your ears, you know, academics. No, they don't. But, you know, but it is important because other academics read it, judges read them, you know, I can tell you. And at the time I was thinking that, you know, what's the point? What is the point? We're turning on the television and we're just seeing the horror, the absolute horror, the Superdome horror. Like it was awful. And so we're these, you know, first world problems sitting in Austin, Texas, and at these law schools around the country. And we're thinking, why are we going to publish this thing? Well, a couple of reasons. I felt like we needed to honor our contracts. You know, we had academics that had signed contracts with us to publish, and in the academic world, it is important. You know, part of their progress is measured by publication. The second reason was the institutional knowledge on any journal. The institutional knowledge is 1 year. The class above you tells you what to do, and then you tell the class behind you, and that's how you know what to do. And so we didn't want any sort of interruption. And also, you know, just from a kind of a selfish standpoint, I didn't want our class of law review kids to have that, you know, Barry Bonds asterisk beside us, you know, thinking that, oh, yeah, you were on law review, but you didn't really do anything. It doesn't really mean anything. You didn't have those skills when you came out the other side. But the real reason, I think, is because whenever you're in a crisis, routine, familiarity, and friendship is what gets you through. And so we don't know anything about anything. Like when I break this to you too, when you go out to the job market, you won't know anything. But you know, you do what you know to do. And as strange as it was, we were law students. We know how to be a law student. We knew we were editors of the law review. We know how to edit a law review. We know how to do that. And that gave us enough of a focus. It gave us something to focus on so that we could bear everything else, the financial realities, the horror that we saw in our communities. When we came back, it was rough. I mean, you know, grocery stores, mold, crime, you know, this was a safe space. And so, you know, I guess I'll just read the last sentence to my recount. We are most thankful for the true lasting friendships that emerged from that year, born of incredible confusion, sadness, uncertainty, and much hard work, but also of our unique experiences, stories, inside jokes, and some things as ordinary as a shared meal. And that's what we got. And most of all, during that time, like I said, we suffered. We didn't suffer as much as most suffered, but we suffered. We were uncertain. There was, we didn't know what was going to happen. The worst had happened, it seemed like, and we just didn't know. But we had each other. And I will say to this day, we've had each other. And I just want to point out that my good friend Adam Swensick is here. He was on the law review with me. He was on the senior board with me. And he and I and Janice Sabito and Dan Carr and Corey Devine and everybody on the law review, we are friends to this day because of that experience. So again, I I applaud you for going through this. And I just wanted to, it's difficult for me to go back and I'm right where you were right now, like, and this happened. And so, it makes you thankful for what you have.
Thank you very much, Judge. Our next speaker is Hari Krishna. As terrifying as it was for everybody who was from other parts of the United States, imagine how terrifying it would have been to be here in the first weeks of your life outside your home country of India. Hari was here as an incoming LLM and Admiralty student. And I'm going to embarrass Hari, which I do routinely. The way that he responded to what happened, I have always found tremendously admirable. No pressure there, Hari. Over to you.
Thank you, Professor Davey. And thank you all for being here. Thank you guys for being here. Look, Professor Davies always makes it sound like this big thing.
It was, Hari.
I've agonized, I've philosophized about what I was going to say today. But because I've told this story many times over the years, but depending on the context, depending on where in the world I am, it's different. And here we are today, 20 years later, in the place where it all happened. And part of me is just lost for words, like, well, where do I begin? But I'll take a leaf out of the judge's book. Any LLMs here? Look, I came here in July 2005, 18th of July, I think. It was my first time outside of India. But I wasn't completely naive. I had a general idea of what life outside India was like. But then I'd never been outside physically. So I show up, not knowing much. But what I lacked in awareness, I made up with self-confidence. I was 24, and as some of you are, and you know a lot, right? So the first thing that strikes me, I come here via Cincinnati, and the first thing that strikes me in Cincinnati is lots of people are huge. Such tall, big people in my life. And I come here, and Tulane puts on this 3-week summer thing for the LLMs, and it's a great tradition. Look, I'll be honest. I had gone to India's top law school. I'd been through 5 years of the Socratic method. I was used to the rigor, the pressure cooker. So I wasn't coming here for that course in basics of American law, whatever. So I spent those 3 weeks just partying things. So I go through that. And we all became very good friends. We were down in the quarter, we were down in the Magazine Street, having great fun. And then we have, as I just said, for the first week of classes, we're like, all right, now time to get serious. And next thing you know, there's a hurricane coming, right? Everyone all over to McAllister Auditorium, Scott Cowan's on stage, and we were like, oh, this is serious, because he's just dressed in shorts and a t-shirt, and he's like, everybody leave. And me, what's a hurricane? Somebody says, oh yeah, well, it's a big ocean storm, low pressure, all of that. I'm from a coastal city in India. I was like, oh, we call those cyclones. Right? I was like, okay, yeah. So I called my mom, and I'm like, hey, there's a hurricane coming and we have to evacuate. She's like, what's a hurricane? And then she's like, oh, if it's a cyclone, shouldn't you be staying indoors? Why are you going anywhere? Right? I was like, I don't know, but you know what? All my friends, and we were very close. 3 weeks together. We're doing this other great American tradition. We are going on a road trip, right? We don't know where we're going, how long for, and you said you carried your laptop with you. I was coming from a third world country. My laptop was the most valuable thing I owned. So I put it in the closet. I was like, I'm not going, on a road trip. So we show up, we barely know what's going on. And, the advantage I had was I have an ear for accents. So I could understand what everyone in my class was saying, whether they were from China or South America. So I was elected the class president, right? And that becomes relevant. I don't say that just to big myself up, because over the next couple of weeks, that became really important. Now, we show up at New Orleans airport and there are 2 rental cars left. We got those 2 rental cars, full-size sedans, Chevy Impalas or whatever, and decided we were going to go to Houston. Why? Because my friend Pedro Anzola from Venezuela, his dad was like the biggest tax lawyer in Venezuela, and he acted for all the American oil companies. So he spoke to someone in ConocoPhillips or somewhere, or ExxonMobil. They said, yeah, we've got oil field workers accommodation in Houston. You're welcome to come stay there. So we started driving in that direction, and we get up to a certain point and there's a big massive roadblock. Oh, where do we go now? We can't go to Houston. So we hang a right, go to Lafayette. And then the next morning we're in Dallas, Texas, right? And everyone's furious, so eventually 4 or 5 cars full of foreign LLMs show up and everyone's like, what's going on? Nobody knows, right? And at that age, you tend to get angry, you want answers. What's Tulane doing? Nobody knows, because we don't know what's going on, right? So we stayed in these hotels for a week or so, trying to figure out, everyone's glued to the TV. This was before smartphones, this was before mobile internet, so you got your news on TV. So we were like, what's going on? Okay, well, looks like New Orleans isn't coming back anytime soon. And what's Tulane doing? There is no Tulane. Everyone's struggling with, your roof blew away. And so everyone's struggling to figure out, what do we do? How do we get back on our feet? And at that time, I will say, we were lucky as foreign students. We didn't have roots here. We had just arrived. So we didn't lose our homes. We didn't, at that stage, we had lost a week, right? And we were on this great adventure. But as a foreigner going through that situation, and remember, this was just 4 years after 9/11. So going through US airports as a brown man with a beard, not comfortable, right? So I got the 4S thing, the whatever that is, the high security screening. They make you do this whole dance. I got accustomed to it. Every airport, I was like, yeah, I'll get up on one leg, down the other leg. Did all of that. We were trying to figure out where to go, right? And I know Dean Conroff was, in all these conversations with deans of law schools all over the States. Some of them were, I think there was some sort of agreement that they were going to try to take students in eventually. But while all this was going on, we hit upon this roadblock that a lot of the LLM students, the non-maritime LLM students, had applied to a few different universities and had other options. They were in contact with those other law schools and said, well, can we come here instead, right? Whether they were studying environmental law, corporate law, whatever. The maritime LLMs came here because they wanted to come to Tulane, right? And including me. I was like furious with the cosmos. I want to go to Tulane. And I was supposed to be the maritime law, one of the two maritime law center fellows that year, and I was like struck with imposter syndrome. Well, what am I going to do if I'm not at Tulane, right? I was supposed to be doing research and helping the professors do stuff. So on the one hand, it wasn't such a massive inconvenience. On the other, it was a life-changing experience, right? In those couple of weeks, we went to a few different universities. The dean of one law school refused to see us, right? A professor, a Tulane professor, suggested that we go there. We show up, and his assistant comes out and says, are any of you US citizens? No. Are any of you in the JD program? No. We're foreign LLMs. Sorry, the dean won't see you. So we were like, oh, leave. What are we doing? And through all of this, 504 area code phones weren't really working, right? And during the 3 weeks that I was partying in the French Quarter, there are all these shops that sell T-shirts and knickknacks, Mardi Gras beads. A lot of those are run by Indians, right? And one of those Indian brothers, like, I'll give you a good deal on a mobile phone. So I had this burner phone with a 985 area code, I think from Slidell or wherever. That worked, right? And that helped me do what Professor Davies always talks about as a great achievement. I was able to connect my friends with law schools around the United States because I was the class president. They knew to contact me. And I was like, okay, let me call this law school and see if they've got space for you. Let me call this other law school. And eventually there's 3 of us sitting in Atlanta airport. What do? We're maritime LLMs. No, none of the schools really want us. They don't know what to do with this. And by then, Professor Davies had, just like you were saying with Basil Marquez, he was talking to Michael Sterling, also at the University of Texas. And eventually, Michael Sterling put together this program for us to go do directed research. It just made it up, 4 credits. And we were like, why Austin? I mean, now we know that, okay, Michael Sterling, the Kirby case, all of that, that we learned about all of that later. But at that time, as a foreigner, I was like, Austin, maritime law. Like, well, what are we doing? And through all of this, people are like, oh, why isn't Tulane doing more? And I was like, calm down. I mean, and because I've been through this experience with, law school in India where people would get really agitated about, the administration versus the students. It's like, calm down. Everyone's dealing with their own stuff. They're trying to make sure that they have homes to go back to. Don't make this all about, okay, your problem. It's everyone's going through a crisis. So that was my immediate Katrina experience. I eventually ended up in Austin, I think in October, beginning of October, maybe. It was quite a long time while we were figuring it out. We spent a week in Dallas, a week in Fort Lauderdale, a few days on the road. But I will say, I don't want to take up too much more time, but that whole Katrina experience changed my life forever. I went to Austin, Texas. Soon after, I met my wife. She was in the JD program at UT. And the reason I remember the name Basil Marquez so well is because he then persuaded her to come to Tulane to study civil law with Professor Yiannopoulos. So she transferred here when I came back. And thanks to Professor Davis, I spent another year here, started an SJD, never finished, sorry. Because, again, I have him to blame. He introduced me to a law firm in the Middle East that then gave me a job. Because I had originally come here thinking, I'm going to go back to India, right? I was working at India's top maritime law firm, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go back. But then, thanks to Katrina, I met my wife, and India doesn't, or until recently, didn't allow foreign lawyers. So I wasn't going to go back to India with an American wife, or girlfriend at the time, and not even make $20,000 a year, right? So that's how I ended up in Dubai in 2007, and I still live there. And I must say, during this whole time, a lot of what I've done professionally has been impacted by my Katrina experience. Having seen how a city, a law school, a community recovers and responds to crisis. A lot of what I do as a maritime offshore marine services lawyer is emergency response, crisis management, and to keep a cool head through whatever's going on around you. That really helps. I mean, it's not a skill that you acquire in law school normally. I mean, you're focused on issue spotting and, analyzing test cases. But in your real life, it would serve you well to think about how do you keep a cool head? How do you get people to not get wound up? And especially with, people get really wound up about outcomes of cases, about outcomes of elections. And at times like that, you need to think, these are all short-term issues. In the long term, none of it really matters. Things will find a way of coming back to normal. I'll end on that note. Nothing more to add.
Thanks very much, Hari. As you can probably tell, notwithstanding Hari's modesty, I doubt that there's anybody in the LLM class of that year that does not owe what they ended up doing to Hari Krishna. He gathered them all up, looked after them all. It was an extraordinary experience for him. The next speaker is Mike Vitt, who I've just learned is recently retired as Vice President and General Counsel of BISO, Pushboat Riverboat Company here in New Orleans. Mike graduated with an LLM and Admiralty some years before Katrina, but he also has one of the most remarkable Katrina stories that I've ever heard. So without further ado, Mike Vitt.
It's with great gratitude I'm here. 25 years ago this day, I first entered the halls of Tulane. And it's been quite the rocket ride for me that day 25 years ago as a new LLM student. So today, brand new retiree, I'm pushing 70, but so I had a full career before I came to Tulane. I was a tugboat captain on the East Coast, and so I had a maritime background. I was not just an operator of vessels, but also in the office as a port captain, middle management. So I had some business background. Coming to Tulane after becoming a Maryland lawyer was really one of my bucket list achievements. I decided in 1994 that I was going to go to law school, not having a college degree, and in 1999 graduated from law school and took the Maryland bar. Came here, learned a thing or two about New Orleans, which I knew only as a maritime person. I didn't know anything about the legal profession here. I didn't know anybody in the legal profession in Louisiana at all. I really didn't have any more knowledge about Louisiana other than gumbo, and I'd heard of hurricanes. As a mariner, there are things you run from. So my story is about how I didn't run from a hurricane, but how we stayed and suffered some of the worst times and some of the best times I've ever experienced. In the days leading up, in the year leading up to Hurricane Katrina, I was an associate at a local law firm, practicing maritime law, doing mostly litigation and almost pure maritime work with quite a bit of transaction work. So my education at Tulane was spot on, and it very helpful. One of the clients of the firm was a local towing company that was looking for an in-house counsel / other things too. And I happened to be fortuitous enough to be asked to join the company. Ian Biso and Son. It's a local New Orleans company that services ocean-going ships that call upon, among other places in the U.S., here on the Mississippi River. So only a few weeks before Katrina, I was hired to be, an employee of the company. And I knew very little about what I was getting into, other than, okay, I could handle the legal work, because that was pretty much what I was used to. Oh, I could handle the operational side, because, okay, I had some background on that. The uniqueness of New Orleans and the uniqueness of Louisiana, not so much. I had to learn quite a bit. But in the 5 years that I had been here as a Louisiana lawyer, I did learn a thing or two. And with the maritime bar, both plaintiff and defense side, there is a sense of community. And that community is somewhat profound. I think it's much better. There are other legal communities that are like that, but the maritime bar holds a special place in my heart. So having the background that I did in attending different events around town, I happened to have attended a meeting of the Corps of Engineers. He was explaining about 4 weeks before Katrina hit, what would happen if a Cat 5 hurricane nailed New Orleans. And the Corps of Engineers person, who probably shouldn't have said these things, but did, hold on to your socks because you're going for a swim. And that stuck in my mind. So when we saw the track of Katrina coming, and I joined Ian Biso about 5 weeks before Katrina. So, and one of my jobs was to assign personnel to go on vessels. So I was watching this hurricane, as well as our crews, who had homes and families all around Louisiana, who were bailing left and right. We gotta get out of here. This is gonna be a bad one. Well, our customers were saying the same thing. We can't get out of here. Our ships can't leave because the river's closed, or whatever situation we're in. We need assist tugs to hold us in place. So we had a very strong need for our mariner contingent to be on the vessels, not be at home. We had a really tough time manning our vessels. So having had a marine license as a captain, I elected to put myself on one of our vessels. And that's where I spent Katrina, right across from the airport. And my watch was basically the night Katrina hit. I can tell you this, we had a wind gauge, and the wind gauge never really stopped bouncing back and forth between some pretty frightening numbers, but 125 knots certainly was in my mind's eye, because that's what I saw. And the rain sounded like bullets hitting the glass of the towing vessel's windows. You could see about 3 feet. We were pushing on a ship that was under construction at Avondale Shipyard. It was so high out of the water, it was an empty tanker, that half of its stern tube, where the propeller rotates, the propeller shaft rotates, was out of the water. It was a gigantic Clorox bottle. We had 10,000 horsepower on it to hold it in place. But the river was steadily coming up, and it reached flood stage at about 18 feet. Well, at 19 feet, New Orleans sinks. New Orleans is underwater. Never mind the levee breaks and that kind of thing. I'm talking about the front levee here in New Orleans is up, at that time was 18 feet. It's now around 20. Ironically, the lowest point in the levee system is the Corps of Engineers. Um, long story short, we spent the watch using our power to hold the ship in place, not wondering, but really being quite apprehensive about whether or not we would even stay alongside the vessel, would this ship break free. All night long, I heard, "Mayday, mayday, our ship's broken free. I got 4 tugs on it. I can't stop. I'm running on the ground. I'm up on the beach. Fire, come get me, please." This is what I heard. And it was a frightening time. Now, my boat, very powerful, 4,000 horsepower, 125 feet long, very stout, windows that were literally a half-inch thick, stout boat. I was not afraid for me. I was afraid for everybody else. And being a local, living in New Orleans at the time, I was afraid for my own family. My wife was a registered nurse. She was in a hospital in New Orleans. My son was a direct care patient attendant. He was in a hospital in New Orleans East. It was not a good time. And immediately after Katrina was a very bad time of no communication whatsoever. Now, me personally, I was in good shape. I had ice. Yeah, Deckhand, give me a Coke. But make sure you put ice in it. Nobody in New Orleans had ice. It was a bad time. It was hot. The city was in terrible shape. Some of the population who were addicts were roaming around looking for things they needed. That was not a pleasant sight. You saw vehicles with people who were riding around looking for trouble. They were armed, and they were definitely looking for trouble. I can only tell you what I saw. And immediately after the storm, because of my operational background, the entire management staff had left, and I was the only executive. Although I wasn't an officer of the corporation then, I was a upper mid-level manager. They put me in charge. Why? I don't know, but they did. So we spent several days doing things like taking people off the bank, putting them on barges or boats, and running them 90 miles upriver. We evacuated hundreds of people. I don't know how many. We didn't keep count. We should have, but we didn't. I can tell you that our crews housed and fed people. I can tell you our crews took care of emergency services within the city of New Orleans. We fought fires with our firefighting tugs. A major fire at Piety Street Wharf was at a chemical warehouse. The city could not do anything. They didn't have any kind of equipment that could put the fire out. It was a bad one. We had a fire tug that could, and we spent that time doing that. Coast Guard asked us to do different things. We did salvage work. We pulled ships off the bank the best we could, or barges that were scattered all up and down. You should have seen this. Barges were not only high and dry, they were up on top of the level. And they weren't one, they were 50, 100. There were dozens, and they were all scattered. The city was in turmoil and chaos. The fire department had no fuel. Ian Bisso did. They came to me and said, "Could you provide us fuel?" Certainly. No problem. Because I had sent my tugs to go get as much fuel as they could carry. We tankered fuel, that's what they call that. We tankered all the fuel that we could get on our tugs. So I got a lot of trouble spending all this money, by the way. but we had fuel for the city fire trucks. And we had fuel for the generators of the homes that needed fuel. They came to us. We had gasoline. We had food. We had stored. We had provisions on board. We were in good shape. We were. City, not so much. When you drove around the city, as we did after the days after, because we had passes to go through anywhere we needed to go to do first tier response, because that's part of our job as in the business that I was in. So driving on the streets that were full of debris of every description, from mattresses to tree limbs to boxes of papers to grandma's portrait, you name it, it was on the street. Driving on top of that pile of mismatch of garbage and just all that, and the smell. People who here in New
Oh, yeah.
Orleans remember the smell.
Yeah.
If nothing else, you remember the smell. And what's not often told about the story about Katrina is that 5 days later, Rita hit. And Rita was a double whammy because it hit a little bit west, but it did not help the situation at all. And our tugs were involved in many things, including taking a ship that was run by a vessel master who basically got frightened out of his mind and started running up the Mississippi River in zero visibility in terrible whiteout conditions with poor radar reflectivity to be able to see the bank, bouncing off the bank, literally hitting back, boom, bang, boom. And one of our tugs went out and got it, took it to anchorage, and a brave crescent pilot got on board and anchored the ship during the hurricane, not when the weather got better, during the hurricane. Now, I'm a lawyer. First and foremost, that was my work with the company I belong to. But even before that, two things. I'm a mariner. I'm proud of it. It's a good business. The maritime law is a great fusion of my personal background as well as the education, the fine education I received here. But also I'm a human. And to see this city that suffered the way it did, there's just no way to explain it. And I don't wish it on any of you ever. My advice to you, if there's a Cat 5 coming to New Orleans, get your ass out.
As I said, one of the most memorable stories that I've ever heard, being on the river in October as the storm came up. By the way, which way was the river flowing?
This is an interesting point. The river flows out. If you tinkle in Chicago, it's going to wind up in the Gulf of Mexico. But Katrina, other direction. Not only did it rise up, the storm surge was so powerful that buoys that were picked up off the bottom, navigational aids, were floating upriver at speed, not just drifting. They were flying upriver. Very powerful surge. There was a 27-foot rise on the Gulf Coast, and I can certainly say with certainty, 18 feet here in the city of New Orleans.
Thanks very much, Mike. Our last speaker, last but by no means least, is Grady Hurley, who is the president of the Maritime Law Association of the United States. I'll say that again, president of the Maritime Law Association of the United States. And well, what? Is also a partner at the New Orleans office of Jones Walker. Grady was here in Katrina and is going to say a little bit, not so much about the impact on the law school or the being on the river, as in Mike's case, but a little bit about the effect on legal practice in New Orleans. Great. Thank you.
Not quite yet, but thank you. When I go back,
Corner off it, just go like that.
There we go. But I know the applause is because I'm the last speaker. And for those of you that are looking at your phones or watches, I have 10 minutes to try to do it in 9, and Martin promises free wine and beer. So at this stage of my life, I look at takeaways. You know, what can we take away from today other than some interesting stories? And each of you will probably take away something a little bit different. But in listening to these stories today, I wrote 3 takeaways for myself, and it may or may not resonate to you, but it's something to think about. One, Katrina impacted individual personally for those who experienced it. Just like putting steel or sword in fire, it'll either strengthen it or break it. It broke some people, it strengthened some people. To today, there's some lawyers that just were crushed by it. There's some that we all know that are better people after Katrina than before Katrina. They shined and have had a different view of life. traveling the United States now for the Maritime Law Association, which I'm president. I get a different perspective, because when I tell folks I'm from New Orleans and I'm from Tulane, I don't hear Katrina that much anymore. We talk about different things, what's going on with New Orleans. They ask, is Hari still on Bourbon Street? And where to go for a good drink? But so that's first takeaway, impact. Second takeaway is what we always, as lawyers, think about as perspectives, whether or not we're picking a jury or just analyzing a situation, because we all have different perspectives as to Katrina and also from what we're hearing today, but it's based upon our age and our life experiences. And I'm going to give you an example of that in a second. And the third takeaway that I hope all of the students take today is that lawyers are kind of important people. You are important people, but not only you're important, that you're valuable because of your training, because of the way you're taught to think. And in times of crisis, people are going to rely upon you, not only if there's a case or a transaction, but in your community. So think of yourselves as providing legal advice, but also providing advice and giving back to communities. And Katrina is a great example about what countless of nameless lawyers gave back to the community because of their insights, their analysis, and their abilities. So let's go to perspectives about hurricanes, typhoons, and cyclones. We're celebrating the 60th anniversary of Hurricane Betsy. On September 9th, 1965, my mom woke me up and said not to get out of bed. I heard the swishing of water and my dad walking around the house. We went upstairs to our playroom where our neighbors also eventually gathered. Mid-morning, an army duck came by our house, knocked down the front door in doing so, and evacuated several individuals, including one who was pregnant, from our house. I recall as a youngster, not only excitement of getting on an army duck, but also the snakes seeking shelter in the front lawn of our magnolia tree. I recall as a child the word that you've also heard today, the excitement of moving into my aunt's house while our folks removed floors and baseboards to dry out our house and also pour bleach everywhere that they could find bleach. There was no federal aid at that time. There was no EPA, fortunately or unfortunately, and Lord knows what chemicals I may have been exposed to. But about 8 months later, my folks never let us come to the house until a certain point in time. About 8 months later, when we first came back, I recall moving back in. There was a mattress on the floor, very little furniture. The house smelled new between the nylon rugs and that smell of new paint. And then school began and I got back in my routine. So way back then, my perspective was much more different than fast forward 40 years to 2005. Unlike one of our friends who was on Bourbon Street in 2005, I'm not naming names, okay? I had 5 children, an active maritime practice, and in 2002 been president of the New Orleans Bar Association and was currently in a court working with attorneys and judges. Life was good. The day before we evacuated, I returned from a business trip in the cool and crisp air of Seattle, Washington, where coffee welcomed you every morning in every street corner. And I came back to a nervous household of dogs and kids and cats, and I was trying to figure out what's wrong. Life is perfect. Well, we evacuated to enter contraflow, which means all traffic's flowing in the same direction. With a dog, with a cat, ended up in Lafayette, Abbeville, and eventually our Joan Walker office in Woodlands, Texas. But, it reminded me when looking back of Shakespeare, The Tempest, also a storm, misery, makes strange bedfellows, but misery also loves company. But that sounds strange and archaic, but it's kind of true in that we're looking for communities. We were looking to connect, to reconnect. One of the first connections I had was with Judge Afric, who was also in Houston with his dog Peaches and his wife. And it was just good to connect with something from New Orleans. But we suddenly, after the initial shock, and going like many people to shopping at Walmart, because very few of us brought clothes or underwear, even though your wife may have told you to pack for the whole day. It was an opportunity for our legal community to use both our organizational skills and our communication skills. It also helps that lawyers generally have a don't lose mentality. Because Katrina is as Dean Potteroff is a perfect example of, you just don't quit. You don't think about quitting. You don't think about losing. You think about the next step forward and always moving forward. And if you have to pause, you put your head down, you pause again. It's like Mike, he's next to that ship. He's not thinking about himself and thinking about the next step forward. How can I make the moment better for not only for myself, but for other people? I think that's somewhat ingrained in lawyers, because aren't we at the end of the day problem solvers? Aren't we looking at what the problem is in a particular case? What's the applicable law? What's the holding? What's the resolution? How does it apply to other facts and circumstances? All of it may not make sense now, but it's ingrained in you as part of your new DNA. So, at part of Katrina, life changed, but lawyers were important and part of that change. But also I noted that it may, in a strange way, prepare some of us for the new age of practice of law, even for, God forbid, COVID, which will probably be a symposium 20 years from now. But why do I say that? Because Jones Walker and other law firms were successful because we were forced to embrace technology. We were forced to store files and do work on computers. We were transitioning from paper and file cabinets to computers. We were still in the age pretty much of Blackberries, not so much the smartphone, but Blackberries back then were a lifeline. We also learned how to work remotely, which is sort of a strange concept in 2005, but we all, as lawyers and individuals at times, working remotely, doing things hopefully efficiently and at all hours of the night, even though we weren't in an office. And also, we sort of learned how to reshare. We had pools of secretaries. We were interacting with our administrative staff. But isn't that how we function best when we work together as opposed to in a caste system? So Katrina really was an opportunity as much as it was a disaster. The bench and the bar worked in common goals, even though, the national papers may, thank you, Martin. Thank you, John, on that. We're gonna go through a series of slides, even though national papers were writing us all. We talk about civility, we talk about prescription, we talk about nailing the other guy and getting the advantage. Well, that wasn't a key in Katrina.
Where am I going? Where am I going?
As I talk, if something looks interesting.
All right, I'll just scroll gently as you talk. Okay.
Yeah, be a gentle scroller if you can, Martin. And so it was a time for the bench and bar to work together for common goals. And what Martin is slowly scrolling through is that we have a huge book And it's paper, for those of you that just say Gritty's embracing technology, starting from September to November. It seemed like a year, but you will see that, the legal profession in New Orleans basically came back in November through a lot of hard work and efforts. And, you'll see that, our firm not only kept the notebook of articles, but our firm and several other law firms, as you will see here, we're also messaging to the public, which is part of our system. We are there, we're helping you, here's where we are. We also learned that it was valuable not to have just one office in New Orleans. At the time, we were in Baton Rouge, we were in Lafayette, we were in Miami, we were in DC, we were in Houston, we were in the Woodlands. And from a firm's perspective, it created unity because lawyers in New Orleans were working with lawyers, are sitting next to lawyers in Baton Rouge. I was in the Woodlands working with our energy lawyers, and I had an offshore maritime energy practice at that time. We were hustling, putting together what Martin has up now, e-signs and alerts, and we weren't the only firm doing that. We were trying to message to our clients and to our people, there's insurance issues in maritime law, it's force majeure issues, there's indemnity issues, and people were putting together seminars with other firms and other attorneys to address issues, to give out, quite frankly, free information, because we were trying to keep ourselves active and people motivated. Oftentimes we had daily calls with clients. Clients want to know what's going on. They wanted reinsurances. They wanted to know what the end game was and how they could get there. There's people, there's property that's involved, but there's businesses to bring back together, and there's financial and other concerns with that. And law firms were putting out ads. At the same time, the national news was somewhat counting us out. You'll see articles up there saying they're going bankrupt, the city's in shambles, things are going terrible. Well, right before Rita, I came back to New Orleans. I was in the first plane load on Southwest, if I remember it was, coming into New Orleans to go look at our New Orleans offices, which were then at 225 Barone Street, with 4 attorneys. And like Mike was saying, and some other people saying, and the only way that I can describe this to you, if you've seen some of these recent movies about the Breathless, or where a plague is hit, you walk to get off a plane and you rent a car, there's no traffic lights working. There's very little electricity. You'll see intermittently a soldier with a rifle, you need a pass to get into town. But as Mike said, no one will ever forget the smell of New Orleans, mold and rotting vegetation. And it was eerily quiet. And there was only one restaurant open downtown and in the French Quarter, and it was the Redfish Grill, and we made our way there. Ray Nagin was mayor at the time. He was eating there. They had 2 dishes, paper plates, plastic forks, but it was the best New Orleans food you ever tasted because you were with friends and it was a sense of normalcy. So fast forward from this was in September. Those of us that were in Houston was afraid that Rita was going to hit Houston, and so everyone was escaping Houston to come back to New Orleans, and it was a huge traffic jam. And it was I listened to my wife this time, and then 14 hours later, we made it to Baton Rouge. Sometimes she tried. And so we made it back, and little things like the grass had grown to be 6 inches. And for some reason, although our roof may have been blown off a little bit, some people in the house wrongly were more worried about the grass than throwing out all the trash in the refrigerator that really didn't smell good. So we all long for normalcy. Around November 6th or so, most firms were starting to come back and operate. The New Orleans Bar Association, believe it or not, during all this, set up a network. And see, they graduate, was the executive director. She did a paper that was handed out today about the New Orleans Bar Association and their efforts. So I recommend that to you. We're all longing to get back into the routine by November, early November. 60% of law firms reserve local operations, and from then we've moved forward. People will often say, "How did it affect the practice of law?" And I'm somewhat embarrassed to say, because there's such a thing called Katrina guilt, that for a long time lawyers were never busier because clients had problems. And I will say that the out-of-town clients normally would float your bills for 60 days, sometimes 90 days, through a payment upon receipt. So there was an outpouring from other states, clients and individuals pulling for New Orleans, for the legal community and others, even though the national news may have been dire. So I quoted Shakespeare, but also, there's a quote, "Tale of Two Cities." It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Certainly, it was the worst of times from the disaster. But the best of times, as you reflect on it, are the people that became good friends and worked together and put aside differences to work together toward a common goal. So the takeaway for today, before the wine, the beer, and the refreshments, is be proud that you'll be future lawyers. Although some of the stuff that you're doing right now may not always make sense, you may not like corporate law. One reason I became a maritime lawyer, it's going to come in handy. It's going to stick with you. And so your training is beyond law school. Embrace it, enjoy it, and best of luck to you.
Professor Davis, can I just, one thing that's struck me, it is about the community. I mean, that's the thread here. And as I listen to these stories, I'm just flooded with memories. And just absolutely, just memories are coming back. And I wanted to add that it wasn't just leaders in the community that went into high gear. It was law students too. So this is only half of it, right? So I had to look and thumb through it, and we started that year. Professor Luther Love McDougall had passed, and so we dedicated that year to him. And one of the dedications that was written to him was by David Gelfand. And Professor Gelfand, during Katrina, what he did was he had organized a coalition of attorneys, law review members, and other Tulane students from all over the country during that entire fall semester and into the spring semester when we were coming back, to help regular people, navigate the legal system in New Orleans regarding rent, insurance, FEMA, other issues associated with the hurricane. These were people who couldn't afford lawyers, who didn't have any resources, didn't know who to call, whatever. He galvanized Tulane Law School and got an army of law students, to help real people with those problems. And it was just one. In the midst of all those successes, you would take 2 steps forward and then you take 3 steps back. And Professor Gelfand, of course, at the very end of that year, tragically drowned. And so the bookend to the Tulane Law Review that year was dedication to him. It was just, you said, the best of times, the worst of times. It was,
Grady, what's your current position again?
Sorry.
Look, everybody who was here, everybody has Katrina stories. You've heard 5 remarkable Katrina stories. Please join us in the multipurpose room for the refreshments that Grady has mentioned several times, and have conversations with our speakers. But first of all, before I finish, the idea for this event was Cami Pines, so I thank Cami for the and of course, I thank our speakers for their remarkable